Namaste everyone, and today I want to talk to you about VAKOG clogs. They're type of shoes, you think about the clogs that you get in Holland, the wooden shoes, and VAKOG is just an analogy for your five senses. Now, the reason that this is important is that effectively at the end of the day we tap in and interpret the information that goes around in our world through our sensory system, of which there are the five, which is VAKOG. Okay, so I'm going to just start with the first one, which is all about visual. So your visual filter, if you like, that we start filtering information in through our system is visually. So we might go, look at something and maybe like a little baby, and you go, oh, that's just so amazing. So you see how you can immediately associate a visual with how you actually feel, and that's exactly what NLP is all about. It's your neurological firing and wiring associated to some kind of typically linguistic or environmental trigger, I suppose you could call it. Okay, so how we filter the world affects our story, and as I was saying before, you change your story, you change your life. So if you're getting positive responses internally from your filters and the way you're interpreting the world, then that's fantastic. If not, then obviously that's when you want to look at changing it. And that's amazing. We've just got a whole flock of geese. Is it a flock of geese? Just fly right over the car. That was really cool. Sorry, I got a little bit distracted there. And so that was a great visual for me. So, I'll go, oh yeah, that's not something that happens every day. It made me feel kind of good. And I was like, oh yeah, that's something a little bit different. So that's a classic case of a visual. A lovely thing that moving forward, if that ever happened to you, I was like, oh, I remember when that happened to me once before. Doesn't happen very often, but that's just lovely. So that's visual. Then we have another one, which is your auditory sense, which is obviously what you hear. So this is things like music. It's like the way people say things to us, the tone that it's actually being used when someone's speaking to you. So if someone's being all soft and gentle and romantic, like, you go, oh, they're being so lovely and sweet, or if they're going, yeah, right, okay, I'm okay with that. Well, clearly the interpretation, because of the tone, is they're not really okay with that, and that will in that case be paired with the visual filter of the way that they're saying it, the way that they're holding their body, that combination. Your system then goes, right, I've got a visual, I've got the auditory, I've combined the two, that plus that equals this. So in this case, it's like, oh, you're saying you're okay, but the visual is incongruent with what is actually being said. So you then question it. Now, this is actually something that I find quite common that a lot of people don't pick up on. And I would love to have it where people do challenge this more often, because it happens a lot in, dare I say, media, where there is an incongruence with what is being said and what is being seen, and quite often how you feel. So, I would love it where people start questioning using their Sherlock shoes that I've mentioned as well, where they go, right, that, I don't know, say a politician said this, and they look all smart and they look all, I'm just giving an example of a politician, could be anybody, saying this, and they're saying, it's we've got to do it this way, we've got to do it that way. And then you've got it where but their body language, they're all like stiff or whatever, and you can see that they're kind of sniggering or something, just as an example. It's like, yeah, we're really looking after you, it's like, we're really looking after you. But they'll try and disguise it with the way that they're actually saying it. So, do be aware of what the body language that you're seeing. So, be the visual and what they're saying. It's like, it's totally, I don't know, you know, in the old days, like for example, I'll give you a classic. You know, again, we're going back to the marketing thing where they said, like with I think it was cigarettes, and there was a big company that did this, and they were saying, you know, smoking is good for your health, and they got doctors to say it, and this was predominantly, I understand, in the States. And it was like, you know, if it's safe for a doctor to do it, therefore it must be safe for you. So you see the professional person, the man saying it's safe. However, the incongruence is that, you know, in this one particular scenario, the main person who was actually doing the promoting died from emphysema. So there is obviously an incongruence between, you know, even though visually they look, you know, smart and with it, they then promoted this brand, and he wasn't actually a doctor, but he was like this outdoor back adventure guy, model. And yeah, and he got free cigarettes and landed up dying from it. So not ideal, but the message was incongruent. The visual was like, live this healthy lifestyle. The auditory was all the beautiful music that went with it. You know, in that instance, it was also, it makes you feel good because it calms down, and that's because of the breathing, the kinesthetic, which is the K. Okay, so how you feel, you know, if you do this. So they paired all those, and then, you know, you look successful. So we're back to how you'll look, and you know, and you'll feel like you're part of the crowd because everybody else is smoking. So that's the kinesthetic again, and you'll hear your friends saying, how cool are you that you're smoking? So there's the auditory. So they compound those three together, they combine them, and if they repeatedly repeat that message, then the person then takes it on board that that's actually a cool thing to do, not realizing that it's detrimental obviously to that person's health in the long run, and in this case it actually killed the guy. So sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but I mean, you know, it is remarkable how conditioned we are, and this is the type of thing that, you know, is becoming aware of the VAKOGs. You know, it's starting to raise awareness to that doesn't feel right. You know, I noticed that they said it this way, but the way that they presented themselves was different. So let's get our Sherlock shoes on. Let's start examining that. Is that actually accurate? My feeling is telling me, my radar, which is my goosebump shoes, are saying something's offbeat about that, you know, person or thing or situation. It's all a bit hinky. I'm not comfortable. So I'm wanting people to become aware of, you know, all their senses, and use it where they can, you know, build their awareness and make better educated, well-researched decisions moving forward, you know, in any aspect of life. I mean, it's not just like with advertising, you know, it can be with anything. It can be with, you know, way friends are saying that, you know, like for example, like I gave an example ages ago, you know, like going to church when I was growing up in Zimbabwe, and you know how they were in church, that it was all lovely, and they were, you know, they were visually all beautiful, you know, visually well presented, you know, the auditory was, you know, the reaffirm, and look, there was good messages being given by the priests. I'm not knocking what they were doing and how they were doing it. There's nothing there that I would contradict, you know, because fundamentally the intent is good, you know, it's do right by people, and then, you know, it would be you felt good because you were doing singing, which stimulates your vagus nerve, and you get that sense of community, being in the herd and being accepted. So you get that feeling of being part of the crowd, and you know, we're herding animals by nature because we're humans. And then afterwards we would have a chat and talk with the community, which is lovely. I really enjoyed that, and quite often have sandwiches and tea and whatever after, which was also great. However, sometimes I found, not always, I mean, and it wasn't with everybody by any stretch of the imagination, there were certain individuals that they behaved completely different when they were outside of that environment. So their behavior was incongruent outside church with what they were saying inside church, and how they were presenting themselves inside church. So that mismatch, I call it a mismatch. You got to go, it's got to flow through. You got to be consistent. You got to go, if that's how you behave there, then that's how you treat your family, and that's how you treat your friends, and that's how you conduct yourself in business. And it's got to filter through that being what I call being the force for good, that intent of being good and pure needs to filter through everything that you do, not just in specific scenarios. So, being aware of that now, like I was aware of it internally as a kid. I mean, I didn't know any of this stuff back then, but it was just like, do you know that's not right? It's just like, I don't like how you're speaking to that person or how they behave. It's not. And then you go and go to church. So just don't go to church and be an a-hole. I felt like, just commit. Be one or the other. But yeah, it was enough for me to be put off going. And I mean, like, how sad is that? Because really, we're losing that spiritual component of our lives quite often because of all the mismatches that have happened over the years, dare I say. So to get back onto track with the VAK, the K is the kinesthetic. That's all about how you feel about something, being in touch. It's all the touching and the feeling. You'll have people who love I love the way that feels, because they're so, touchy-feely kind of people, and they're often quite tangible people as well. Like, they always touch you and hug you, and they'll use words like, I've got a gut feeling about that, and a lower sort of tone of way that they actually speak. And then you've got the next sensory side, which is olfactory, which is how you obviously smelling. So these last two are less leaned on typically getting through life, because they it's resultant of just literally your sense of smell. And then G is for gustatory, which is taste. So you've got the olfactory side, which is I can smell that smell, and it's like, oh, I have such a wonderful memory of being in Zimbabwe and fresh rain on the sort of we had really red soil, and that smell just after the rain was just so refreshing and enlivening. And I can close my eyes and just be in that rain right there in that moment, and just go, that just makes me feel so good inside, and that's just a sense of smell. It might be that Granny used to make really good apple pie, and I smell that, and there's my trigger I smell that, and that just makes me feel so good inside, Or it might be the opposite, where there's a stench, and it's just like, oh, I remember that's not a good smell. So it's a negative sensation as well. Then you have got the gustatory, and the gustatory is obviously taste. So it might be, you remember the taste of the apple pie. You remember the taste of, whatever it is that, there was a particular, I remember seeing, it's something called knickknacks that they sell in South Africa, and it's a type of chip. And they started selling something similar here in New Zealand, and it just took me right back to being at university with my friends. And then when I went back to South Africa the one time, they had something called Ghost Pops. Now, I'm not endorsing these brands, by the way. This just is my personal gustatory experience that took me back to a time that really, worked for me, because I felt bonded with my friends. We often used to have Ghost Pops, which was another chip. And it was like, oh, that reminds me of all the good times that I had at university with my buddies. This is so cool. So, you get, and it's being aware of that's what you are. Now, we have primary ones that we tend to lean on. You'll find that people who are more visual or more auditory or the VAK are the three ones that you typically have. So you have the visual, auditory, kinesthetic are the main ones that people use, and you'll have a main one that you'll operate out of. So one might be, so say for example, it's even the language that we use and how we speak. So for example, a visual person will go, oh, I see what you mean, whereas an auditory person will say something like, oh, I hear what you're saying, and a kinesthetic person might say, you know, I feel you, sister, you know. So same meaning, it's just presented in a different way. And I often find that visuals tend to be a lot more fast-paced in the way that they talk. So it'll be, for example, we're going on this walk, we're going to see some beautiful scenery, I can't wait, we're going to see the lake, and oh, we saw this amazing rainbow when we were out there, and there were all these llamas and sheep, and it's just amazing, and the color of the water was just so amazing, it was just out there, and I was with my friends and they looked gorgeous, and I had these new pants on, and I dressed up for the occasion and I really looked good. So that's a classic of somebody who's like visual. And I find that there's a lot of emphasis on how their homes look. They want things to look good because their primary filter is the visual. So it'll be that they've got beautiful homes, very well laid out, beautiful things in their ornaments and photos, and paintings, and beautiful gardens quite often, and they present themselves often really well. So how they dress, everything's matchy, or makes a statement, or whatever the case might be, and like to go out and do their makeup and whatnot. Then you've got the auditory people, and they might be less inclined to do that. So it'll be as long as they'll go on the walk like that and go, oh, we heard the birds in the trees, and I heard the ducks and the geese as we were walking along, and oh, would it be nice if we had our iPod going or something, so we could have had some mellow music in the background. Oh, I listened to what they actually said. Probably didn't notice half of what was going on because they're just listening to the conversation. We had good conversations. I came away and I heard this, and I remember them saying that. So you can again tell now they tend to be a much lower, kind of slower pace when they're talking. And again, they tend to be in professions that have a leaning towards auditory. So when the visual people tend to have a leaning to be in the visual industry. So quite often you'll find them in things like graphics. They'll be designing things that look good. They might be, architects or maybe sculptures, but they see the finished product and then they work back from there. And then you have like the auditory guys might be DJs or songwriters or musicians or poets or screenwriters. And auditories are great because they can listen to something and it just goes straight in, you see, whereas a visual person will probably need to see it and write it down and go from there. And then you've got the kinesthetic kind of person who it's all about the feeling. It's like, don't really care what it looks like. Again, they're a bit more slower paced. They tend to like to have, the house, it feels good. I love the way that clothing feels. It doesn't have to match. If it feels great, it's beautiful. I snuggle up in my little blanket or my favorite jumper. I have my favorite slippers on, or whatever the case may be. And in that case of this example of walking, it'll be, say, for example, I really, needed to get this stuff off my chest. I was feeling really stressed. I just lock all my tension up in my body. So having a good walk with my buddies out in nature made me feel grounded. It made me, I picked up a few rocks and leaves on the way, and I could feel the energy from it, or whatever the case might be. It might be that I felt good after the walk because I got fresh air. I could feel the sun beating on my shoulders as I was walking, and I really needed that boost, whatever the case may be, of that sensation that they actually got with that. So what we tend to do is we have a main one that we operate from, and then we have a side one that we then operate on. So if you're a VA, for example, you'll be a visual auditory. Then your primary predicate will be, you know, I'm seeing this stuff, and I will have a beautiful home, I'll, you know, present really well, and I can also lean on, you know, so and so said this, but it won't be as finely tuned as the visual side is. Okay, but they might, when they're doing learning, for example, do visual and auditory together to compound their capacity to actually filter and absorb the information better. It might be that the person is, for example, auditory kinesthetic. They'll be much slower paced, probably messy in the way that they're dressed, because it's not about looks. It's about feeling comfortable. It's about, you know, hearing what people say, being, you know, in tune with what they're saying, how they're saying it. Auditory people are phenomenal in that they can just, as I said before, take information on board and then they just absorb it. It's fantastic in that respect. They will remember all those little details that visuals quite often don't, because they're auditory. Then you've got the kinesthetics, and the kinesthetics are quite often the feeling people that are in feeling industries. So they'd be the hands-on kind of people. They're the carpenters and joiners and the builders and the, you know, big on sports quite often. They do a lot of, they might be in therapies, they might be in like massage, or just if you think about all the hands-on healing, all hands on deck, you know, with the kinesthetics, and there's going to be a lot of touchy feely stuff. So an example here where you may have mismatches is sometimes you have with a couple where they get together and it's like, you know, one's a visual and one's a kinesthetic, and if the visual is visual auditory, they're not, the kinesthetic's not even in their realm, you know, it is the last port of call. Whereas if they have teamed up with a person who's kinesthetic, they're going to have sometimes a clash, because they're going, well, look, you know, the kinesthetic's going, I need more cuddles, I want to be snuggled more, I want to hold hands with you more, I want to, you know, have a massage with you, or whatever it is, you know, I want to do things together with you, you know. Whereas the visual will go, well, you know, I've given you flowers and I've told you I love you, you know, what's the problem? So as far as they know in their map of the world, is they've delivered how they know best, that suits them. But the kinesthetic's going, well, no, I need it this way. So when we can understand, you know, when I was talking about those maps of the shoes, maps of the world, you know, when we can understand that's their primary predicates, we can choose to adopt them or not. So that we can change our language, how we present the information. And now we know, like in that instance, it might be that, I'll give you more cuddles, I forgot, sorry, so sorry, but you know, in return I'd like to have flowers, or I would like to, you know, I don't know, be seen out with you more, or something, you know, to give you an example. So really, really interesting, the VAK, the VAKOG clogs. So what I would like you to do is try and work out what you are. And what's your main predicate, what's your secondary. If you're in a relationship, you know, try and pick out what they are, and start playing with this. When you go to work, start noticing, be aware of what others, this is where it all starts, be aware of now that you know VAK is the main three that you want to be looking for. You know, who's who, and who do you hang out with most? Because maybe you hang out more with auditories or more with visuals. You know, auditories might be all the musos hanging out together, for example, or the visual people might be painters, or, you know, visual artists of some sort, you know. And kinesthetics might be a whole bunch of hands-on therapeutic people. And that's, now you go, oh, I understand why I get them now. So I hope you found that useful. Give me some feedback, will you? I'd love to find out, either here in this channel, or hop over to the Facebook group and just, you know, have just let me know. It doesn't have to be long. It can just be, I've now worked out that I'm a visual. I mainly operate from this, and that my partner's more, you know, auditory, and I get it now, and thank you, that was really useful. So all about getting you in your own shoes, you know, on your own path, going your own way. And I really encourage you to just take that step. It's not a big exercise, and I hope that helped. And if it did, please will you like, share, subscribe, and share this, please, if you can, with someone else that you think will benefit. Thank you so much for your time. Namaste.